Welcome everyone to our Living Parsha series, where we go into the energy and the depth of the Parsha and the times that we're living in. And we know that everything is included within the Parsha of the week. All that unfolds for us during the week, when read and when understood properly, we're really seeing it throughout the pattern of our week and our lives and what we need to sort of more think about. So jumping into what we're learning about is the four stages of personal growth. That's something that's good to always talk about. And every Parsha and everywhere that we go and whatever we do, we have personal growth. And in fact, we're growing, and that's what it says about the souls, that they're called mehalchim, they're going. And the angels are called omdim, they're standing. And they're not going. And we're always growing, we're always moving. And if we're not, then something is abnormal. It's not normal, because we're going and things are happening, and life goes on, with what is happening from the inside and what's going on from the outside. We're like, oh, well, that's actually normal. And it's the balance that we have in understanding that. Michaela, could we turn off that heat? That would be amazing. Thank you. That would be schmaltzing. You could, yeah. Everyone knows what schmaltzing means. Just okay. Some of the words themselves just reveal what they mean. Okay, schmaltzing, Colleen, sorry. I mean, that's like when something's really hot, you're almost like you're being like marinated. That's like schmaltz in the experience of it. So anyways, that's a Yiddish word for being too hot. So thank you for shutting that. Okay, awesome. Welcome, Abigail. Good to see you. So let's jump in about what we're really diving, trying to get into. And those are the four stages of our personal growth. So let me just say what they are, and then we're going to try to see that in the Parsha of the week. And then we are going to try to apply that and how that means and how that applies to us in our lives. Does that sound good? Okay. So the four stages of personal growth, the Arizal tells us. The great Rabbi Isaac Luria, the greatest Kabbalist in the last 1,000 years, buried here in the city of Tzfat, he says that there are four stages of growth, and they are called Ibur. Ibur is pregnancy. Gadlut. Sorry. Yenika. Yenika is nursing. And gadlut, and becoming mature. Okay, very basic in all of our childhood, adolescence, etc., pregnancy. We all came from that place of being we were in our mother's belly, right? My kids are like, really? Even you? Yeah. I was even, that big kid, he was also in his mother's belly. And so we were all there. Little teeny pregnancy, right? And then we're born and we have nursing. The nursing is the weaning that happens. There's the nursing itself, and then there's the weaning that happens afterwards, so that eventually the child could eat on his or her own, and they continue in that development. So spiritually speaking, what that means and how that applies in the spiritual development is as follows. So far we said 3, because there's maturity, and we're going to stop at maturity because that sounds like a good place to be in. Like your parents always say, be mature, like being okay. So there's 3 levels, and we could say the place that we're getting to is a level of maturity, right? So let's try to understand that on a spiritual level. The first level is being impregnated. That means the Talmud describes this stage that the arms and the legs are intertwined together, and the baby is turned over, and he eats from everything that the mother is eating, and he breathes everything the mother's breathing, and he has all of that DNA just going through, and this child is basically not a almost he is or she is a reality in it of their own, but yet they're not, because they don't have any sense of the individuality of being separate and being a being, right? They're now consumed in a sense by the overarching being of the mother. So in a spiritual level, that means when we are unconscious of our higher senses and our base material selves, the ego, which could run rampant, and the amazing, genuine, beautiful soul and heart that we have, and that it is completely mixed up, and it doesn't even know any of the playing cards, what's in the deck. It doesn't know what's happening there. And that's on a spiritual level, that refers to, I would say, the majority of people in the world, that, and including us, we came from there, right? Of being in a place that we don't know what the cards are. What does that mean? What are the, so, okay, I have a mind. Okay, I have a heart. I have an impulse. Okay, I have, a spiritual sensation. I have a physical, like, to understand and to become aware. It's pre-awareness and it's unconscious. And that reality is the first reality that we're just born into. Nobody in the world, right, was born with an enlightened reality. The closest one that did was Moshe. It says about him that he was born at 7 months, and the entire house was filled with light, because as he came down into the world, being the greatest luminary and light that there was, he came down enlightened in a sense. The whole house became light. But the majority of, basically everyone else, right, comes out like having absolutely no sense and being completely fragile, right? Unlike, the animal kingdom, that the fetus comes out and they kind of like get back up. I remember I was a shepherd here, not far in the Upper Galilee for a while. It was an amazing experience. And I remember having a mother goat giving birth to a little goat. I mean, she was in such pain. And then finally she let that goat out. And it was all covered and whatnot, and kind of cleaned itself up or whatever. And it got up and it fell, got up, fell. But eventually kind of got up a little bit right there after a few minutes, like, less than 5 minutes or something. This fetus is just up and moving. It's like an animal, but like that doesn't happen for us humans, because we need our mother. And that's the next level called yenika, nursing. So very interesting, Colleen. Yes, we as newborns, we recognize our mother's voice. We recognize our the scent of our mother. And that's why, children that are sent for adoption and whatnot, have a very hard time really fitting in. And it's a tremendous, struggle for that. But it's not that way for the animals. The mother didn't even want to nurse, the mother goat didn't want to nurse the child until, basically they forced her they put like a block of salt in the place that she gave birth, and she felt that pain, and then she was compelled to nurse. That reminder of the pain reminded her, oh, that's mine. In other words, but we as humans have that connection. We have a birth, and then that birth then puts us in a state of nursing. That state of nursing is now a state that we are using our own senses. We are using our mouths, and we're using our organs, and we're growing slowly but surely. There's like 24 months officially that the mothers like could nurse, but mothers have nursed for even longer than that, 4 or 5 years and whatever. So that state on a spiritual level represents the state of learning, and it's a state of absorbing. It's a state of growth. That's what it is. Like the nursing is a state of growth. The state of growth is the most important state that we could really be in, because it's a state of we're moving towards something. We realize that there's work to be done. We're like this mass, right? It says about Adam Arishon, who's called a golem, right? And it says actually, again, the fetus is called like this golem is like this just block of everything, totality put together, right? You say that about someone who's like the golem of Prague, right? He was like this, thick block of something. So we were like that, and we were this, and then we're turning into something, and we're becoming more and more growth oriented. That there's what is called avoda. There's something called growth, and that level of growth encompasses 2 spectrums. It encompasses doing, but it encompasses absorbing. It is very important to absorb. When one is learning and they're constantly looking at their phone, they're thinking about something else that's going to happen. Are they going to be able to learn as fully and, you could say adequately and richly as someone else that is just focused and being, and the word for that is actually being silent. In Talmudic discussions, it says that when one of the great masters of the academy used to teach, then the student or students were silent, and there was this aspect of absorbing, and that's very much connected to what is called chokhmah, which is intelligence. That level of chokhmah, of intelligence, requires of us to be quiet, right? Just listen. The idea of listening, but not just externally listening, but absorbing listening. That is like nursing. You're absorbed, and you see that with kids very often. How do kids learn? Kids are sponges. They're listening to things that you don't even know that they're even listening to. They're catching all the nuances, all the languages, all of the whoops, the foul, someone said something, and like, how'd that get into your vocabulary? Like, well, Dad, you said that when, when the thing, but you're like, whoops, deed. Like, I'm saying the same thing you are. And because the kids are just listening and listening and listening. And that's what happens pretty much. Like Mark Twain says, even though I went to school, I nevertheless, I forgot the exact quote, but, I didn't let my schooling get in the way of my learning, something like that. Mark Twain said that, because there's learning, like real learning, and that's this level of absorption and sponge learning. And it's almost like downloading kind of learning that happens, because that's what nursing is. You are downloading all this goodness. You don't need any more. You don't need like dessert. You don't need any other main course. You're just getting it all from the amazing liquid that your mother is, giving over to you. It's an amazing concept. So that level is called yenika. We're nursing. Klita. So that's a great question. Yes. So the answer is, Colleen, is this the absorption, the same word as klita in the process of developing? Yes. So generally, this is like an aspect of more of chokhmah and bina. So the chokhmah is this complete quietness, and then there's bina. There's the absorption, which happens on the feminine side of our mind. There's basically for our intelligence to work as adequately as possible. We have these two aspects coming together, chokhmah and bina. Chokhmah is the power of what? It's being completely silent to something and absorbing it, but that's not enough because it needs to absorb into something. So it's not just, so the absorption into something, the space is the bina, but it's not really, but it's called also klita, that you actually chop it and you actually get it, and your neurons are just, doing their thing, and you start, and then you start getting ideas, you start moving, and you start understanding, and that's intelligence. That's what happens to the brain, actually, in the first, they say developmentally, the first 3 years, we develop like more neurons than for the rest of our lives, right? In a sense, and that process, it's unbelievable. So it's intelligence, but it's going into understanding, and that's tevuna. So that's a really great point, Colleen. Thank you. And tevuna is a little different because that's bina. Bina is literally, right, that understanding. But tevuna is more of the application of the understanding into the person, right? Does that make sense? Because you could be theoretical, but if it's not pointing downwards towards your being, right? So tevuna basically points to what is called next dat, which is the consciousness, and it's able to absorb and make the connection, make the change. So that's basically what's happening. We're being fed, right? This chokhmah and bina, and we're in this process. So, okay, so that's the second process. This third process is called gadlut. It's called maturity. So what is maturity? Maturity is when one can make a mindful and an intelligent choice in their life based on their circumstances, based on themselves, and they are attempting to make the best type of choice, right? And that, so they have received from this milk, right, from this chokhmah and bina, and hopefully they're still doing that, which is really where a healthy, mature adult is also a child that also needs to continue to receive what the child received, right? So now that mature mind, that mature person is making decisions, and that those decisions are based on the growth that they have done, right? So that is, right, does that make sense? Okay, so we've got ibur, first level, yenika, the nursing level, and then gadlut, and then maturity. But the Arizal tells us there's another level. So these three levels could be paired in one category, which is called itkafia, which the Zohar says it's the point of subduing oneself, of working on oneself, changing oneself. And that's very important, because if you have no limits to what you're going to do because of your cravings, right, then you're gonna get into trouble sooner or later. I mean, we figure that out as young kids when our teacher kicks us out for being too much of a goofball, and then you do it again, and then you go to the principal, and then the third time, and then your parents, you're like, oh, I better curb myself a little bit. And so we curb ourselves basically throughout our lives, right? Like, you don't really care to open up the door for the other person necessarily. I mean, maybe you do, like, but like, we let, at least in some circles, like, oh, thank you, sir. You know, it's like, it could be politically correct and not really, the person doesn't really mean it, but they are working on themselves, they're being civilized. And that's, of course, usually much better than being uncivilized, right? Unless the civilized is just a mechanism of duping and, you know, someone else and conning them with a white collar type of approach. But yeah, but that's what we do. We curb ourselves, and that's called itkafia. And it's very important to do that, right? So are we there? We're in maturity, and you could ask most adults. If we'll ask you, all of us, are we there? You know, yes, we're mature, but you say, like, am I there? Are we there in our lives? Like, let's be honest, right? No, and that's what we're constantly going at. We're constantly working on ourselves. We're constantly getting to a place of refinement, of connection, of growth, etc. But then we have what the Arizal calls the second maturity, Gadlut Sheni, second maturity. And the second maturity is the stage which the Zohar says is hitapcha. It's a transformation. At this stage, you have been transformed, right? It's not really you that are working on yourself. You are on some level, but at this point, there's a revelation that comes through you because of that first stage of work. So let's try to understand this in the Parsha, okay? So we learn about Joseph and his brothers. So the brothers were these 11 brothers. Joseph has a dream, and he sees them all in the field. And in this field, Joseph dreams that there were stalks of wheat, and 11 stalks of them, representing the brothers. And then there was his stalk of wheat. They're picking up wheat and stalks of wheat within the field. And my stalk rose, and your stalks bowed down to me. Right? Me'almim alumim. And he's like the second to youngest brother standing there. So they wake up and they say he's got a complex, right? Look at this, like, kid. Look at this joke, like, whoa. And forget about it. The next dream, right? The 11 stars are bowing down to him, and the sun and the moon saying, wow, Joseph is something else. But the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, says as follows, explains what happens in this story. So he says that the 11 brothers represent the 12 cycles and the 12 constellations and the 12 realms, we could say, of reality. And they stem from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and they represent the work which is done in the world, sort of in the field, we could say, right? The world is the field. And the work that we do is elevating the sparks of godliness, which are everywhere in the world. We are in this world to raise up the sparks of godliness, to raise them up. And that's the purpose of our creation, being here. Raising up the sparks of Adam, right? That was there at the beginning of creation. And that's taking these stalks, the wheat, which is all over, and collect them. Me'almim alumim, you can collect them into a bundle. What does that mean? What is that process? The Alter Rebbe says that this process is a process of the work which is done, which is that stage of transformation. And within that stage of transformation, me'almim comes from the word ilem. Ilem means mute. V'inachnu me'almim alumim. The word in Hebrew for mute is ilem. Right? So alumim are basically, we could say, those sparks which are there, they're there to become muted to a reality which is higher than them. That idea of muting oneself, right, or being right, is the notion of when we acquiesce to a higher understanding, which is beyond us, which again is what happens when we learn, when we study as a sponge, right? Again, we don't have to be a little, 3-year-old to study in that way of what we call yenika, but when we nurse, we could say, the level of learning. By the way, there's a beautiful understanding that on the holiday of Shavuot, what do we eat? What kind of, it's like my kids' favorite holiday because they get to eat dairy, right? It's like this dairy thing, dairy fest on Shavuot. But what's the idea of Shavuot? Because it's milk. The Torah is called milk, compared to milk. What kind of milk? The milk of the mother. And it's this perfect milk. And so the Torah is really, the learning is really meant to be absorbed in that way of like this mother's milk, which is like this downloadable, like channeled form of awareness and of understanding, which ultimately leads to transformation, right? And maturity, a healthy maturity that one has. And so they bowed down. They were silent to who? To Joseph, right? They were bowing down to Joseph. What is the level of Joseph? So the Ari tells us that's the second maturity. The second maturity is the maturity, Gadlut Sheni is the maturity that there's a channel, which Yosef is called a channel, called Tzadik Yesod Olam, a channel which channels down from the level of Keter all the way down through Chochmah and Bina, the Sfirot, right? Chesed, all the way down the Zer Anpin, all the way down the channel of Yesod is the channel which is called a pillar that is holding up heaven and earth, right? The holy name of God, which is associated with Yesod, comes from the acronym Et HaShamayim Ve'et HaAretz, right? Et, Aleph Hey, Et HaShamayim, Ve'et and Vav HaAretz. The gematria of that is what? Is 17, which is Yosef was 17, right? Which is Tov, right? And Tov, Yesod is Tov because it channels down goodness. Tov Meitiv. We see that in the life of Yosef. Ve'i Yosef ish matzliach. Everything that he did, he was a winner. He channeled down every time, every year, everywhere that he went. He was like won every time. It's amazing. He's in the pit. He's in the house of Potiphar. He gets out. He's like this all-star. And then he gets out, and then he becomes the viceroy, the prime minister of the entire country. Why is that? Because Yosef's channel is the channel of Yesod, which is the channel of Shefa, of divine light and abundance from above to below. And that is what the Arizal calls Gadlut Sheni. the second level of growth, where the brothers, they were the ones, they were raising up the sparks. They were out there, they were shepherds, and they were raising up, they were out there in the field, you could say. And then they brought that together and they were doing their work. They were mature. But then Yosef is the next level. They couldn't understand that because they were like, what is it all about? It's about life is, we struggle. Like, that's what it's about. And Yosef is like, no, we don't have to struggle. It could be like this channel of shefa, of goodness, that comes down in just a revealed way. That's Mashiach way. That's what it says. There's Mashiach ben Yosef, right? And that level of Mashiach ben Yosef is this level of light that basically shows, like, listen, we could be in the world and enjoy and have, right, and receive, and it's not a contradiction to spirituality, just the opposite. It helps you for you to have abundance. It's an abundance mindset, that you are meant to have abundance. In fact, that's why Hashem, God, created the world, right? So God wants to give us abundance. It's just like, but we could only get there once we go through those three stages of Ibur, Yenika, and Gadlut, maturity. Like, you can't really have this level of abundance without going through the stages. And so, and again, abundance doesn't necessarily mean money, right? Abundance is an abundance mindset, which is the most important thing, of even more than money, and actually brings everything else, including money, like, down, right? It's the abundance mindset. And that's Yosef. That's the Gadlut Sheni. That's the second level of maturity. Second level of maturity is a maturity that, you know what? Yes, I'm worthy. Yes, I could have. God loves me. I'm worthy of receiving God's infinite love to me. And right now, I mean, you say this right now to people, this is what people need to hear. This is what we need to hear, that we're worthy of God's infinite love, right? And this is something that is so important for us to say to ourselves as well, right? Because that's the second level of maturity. You could say, well, I'm going to struggle. I'm going to not take a break, right? So I'm just going to give an example. I recently incorporated in my week time for me to go into nature, to go into the woods, which is where I love to go. And for me, it's therapy. It really is. It's it's magical. And so for a while, I was like focused on doing and productivity and things like that, and going into the office and and then I realized, well, I'm feeling a little not anxious, and I'm not feeling the same. And what is it? Because I didn't build into my week the space to be able to receive what a component that I need. But why didn't I do that? Because I thought that maybe I need to, the more productive that I become, more that I do, that's the more productive, right? It's not that that's not the true maturity. The true maturity is to actually know that, 1 second, for me to take a break, or for me to do things which bring me, real, joy and pleasure, and connect me with others, or what, those components of abundance and joy are mature. It's not immature. Like we were told as kids, like, no, you can't stay up late, or no, you can't eat that extra thing. I'm not saying to eat those extra things, but if in the second maturity, that's called the tapcha transformation. If you do eat the extra ice cream, technically, I'm not telling this to anyone to go and necessarily, if that's what you need to go for the next Haagen-Dazs thing, maybe that's your itkafia to say, no, I'm going to go for a replacement. But, and I'm just giving this example, right? But sometimes it's like, well, that's a joy in my life. And that joy, I'm not going to judge myself for enjoying that, because that really just gives me, and it's not necessarily dangerous or reckless, it's in proportion. So why not, right? And that's gadlut sheni. Like when we allow ourselves to have that different mindset of that we are worthy and we could have abundance. And it's just our preconceived notion of being constantly productive as this judgmental part of ourselves that's really not completely mature. And it's not really listening to its inner child, which is, again, what's so interesting, because that nursing of the child is not, he or she is not thinking, well, I nursed yesterday, or, it tastes the same. They're enjoying that nourishing, life-giving experience, of nursing. And that's like the natural growth that we have as children. And again, as adults, as we become mature, but not completely. Because the second maturity is really saying, Yosef is a kid, and he's called a kid, a 17-year-old, because he's got this exuberance. He's got this childlike energy, which is there with him. And that should never go away. That child, he's a kid. He's a 17-year-old. He's like looking at his hair. He's, he's a little immature, but so what? So what if I learned so much from my grandfather, may he rest in peace, but he was just, he was a rabbi for 70 years, but he connected more to like his grandchildren and great grandchildren, because like he's like older, but he was like this child, and he enjoyed the cake just as much as, this great grandchild enjoyed the 7-layer cake. Like for him, it was like, in other words, there was this transformation of joy, of allowing ourselves to have that experience. And that's Yosef. That's we're putting together all of these. We're busy learning. We're busy absorbing, and we're doing that. But then there could be that maturity, and we need to know that we need to bow down to the second gadlut. This gadlut sheni is this maturity of abundance, and the two levels are below to above and above to below. Below to above is the tribes raising upwards, right? And they're silent because they want to go upwards. And the second level is Yosef, and he's channeling down. And that channel is the real maturity, right? Is a higher maturity. It's that stage of maturity, but it's not really fussy and stuck in itself maturity. It's a maturity of itapcha, that one could have unabashed joy and bliss, right? And not worry what other people think. they could be connected to their own inner truth, vibrational frequency, and inside, and not really worry about what's going on necessarily from places that are outside of them. It's this lower maturity, which basically, we dance in between these three stages, basically, or rather even 4 stages sometimes, because sometimes we could be totally like not knowing what we're doing, and we're like, what, I can't believe I just, we're like this ibur, like this golem type of like, all right. And and other times we're nursing, and we're this child, and we need to heal, and we need to continue to learn. And then other times we're this, trying to be the mature adult in the room that's going to make sure that all the bills are paid for, and everyone is happy, and whatever is going on, but yet is going through all the back and forths of what is really going on in life. But then we get to this second level of maturity, and that's gadlut sheni. And that is almost like this enlightenment, you could say. It really is that happens. And the channel for that is Yosef. And that's why Yosef is called Poter Chalom. He says, I could solve a dream. The Alter Rebbe says Poter is the letters Tofer, actually to sew together. So Poter means he solves the dreams. He has dreams, he could solve them, because usually some dreams are like, what happened there? I don't understand. I understand this, I understand that. You tell Joseph a dream, he would be like, oh, well, this means this and this and that. And that's really, and so Tofer is, he took a higher realm, and he tied it together, and he stitched it together to the lower realm, Tofer, right? He united, right? Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, yesod, to unite the two opposites of Zer Anpin and Malchut, and to put them together. So, Tammy, I saw you wrote over there, a different level of trust in Hashem. Sorry, I forgot what that was about when you wrote that, but I wanted to give everyone just a chance to maybe to think about these 4 levels, and to share, like, what does this resonate? Like, what are your thoughts on on these 4 levels of the Arizal, right? The tribes, and then we have Joseph, right? In our lives, we have our tasks, and then we have, the transformation, not necessarily the vacation, but it's within the work, there's a transformation that goes on. Work is actually play. Challenges are actually opportunities. Limiting beliefs are ways of growing to the next level. Uncomfortable sensations are an opportunity to move through other, to other places. So what
I'm dragged to ask for being like Joseph, but I don't want his life before. I want his life after.
So that's a great point. So Michal is saying, like, I don't want the life of Joseph before, I want his life after he became a king. That's where I think that we err, because we think this person just was born into it and that's it. The truth is, he went through it, but what did he go through? He went through a perspective shift in his mind, and that is priceless, because that took him to being successful in all areas of his life. It's not like it's not like this Instagram kind of world that we're in, that we're like, oh, this person has the perfect life, and everything is, they're on the, they're on an island like all the time, and everything's good for them. They're like millionaires, and everything is, they eat like luxurious breakfasts every day. Wow. It's really just such a fake thing that we allow ourselves to think that this is life. And a lot of, basically most young people have this mistake of thinking that they don't have to go through any of the work in order to receive the real reward for, because it could just channel to me, I will manifest it, and that's like a new, let me just think about and manifest it. Well, the truth is, when you think about Yosef and manifestation, Yosef went through the struggle, but his change of perspective then caused this bitachon, right? I guess, Tammy, that's what you're saying, caused this level of trust that he had in Hashem, and that then drew down this incredible abundance.
How do we get this shift?
When I look at the two, yeah. So how do we get this shift? Is the big question. So the shift happens when we face our own selves. The shift happens when we face ourselves in the pit. When we face ourselves in the pit, in that place, and we look at ourselves. We don't look away, because within that mature adult, we could say, there's plenty of fears, there's plenty of traumas, there's plenty of skeletons in the closet, right? And that's what happened to Joseph there. He was thrown into the pit with snakes and scorpions, and he faced them. And he says, I have two ways of dealing with this. I could freak out, and that's it. Or it could be mind over matter. And I make this shift. And so he's like, I'll choose the other. It's like this mountain climber that goes up, and he's stuck in the middle of the mountain. And that's basically where the real climbing happens, where the real shift happens. So Joseph thought that he made the shift, but then he was tested again. And he was sent, right? He was on this caravan. He was like, I need to have bitachon. I need to have trust in God. And I need to have this shift of, it's going to be good. I have trust, and I know it's going to be good, right? Bitachon is associated with yesod, right? That's really, when one has bitachon, trust in God, they're this level of yesod of Yosef. So, and he was thrown into another caravan with Midianites, and then he was thrown into that place, the house of Potiphar, and he's like, and you realize, that's it. I'm just looking at the world in a positive way. I'm actually making a conscious shift in my mind. That's the only way to do it. That's the only way to do it. There's no shortcuts. When you make a conscious shift of, I am not going to react, I'm going to try not to react in that same way. I may find myself, yes, but like, I'm committed to really working on that. That's the transformation from the first maturity to the second maturity, because now, guess what? You actually don't see that. And that's such a beautiful, liberating feeling, because the only reason that you were seeing this about that person, right, is because it was almost like within you. And when you decided to face that and to see things in a different way, then something amazing happened. And actually, that was really all imagination. And most of what we think is real is just imagination. But it's too scary for us to transition towards that, because then we're losing that self, that identity of the self. And that identity of that self, of the mature self that we've made up in our minds as being us, is now lost. And now we have to become, we go into a place that we don't even know about. And that's the life of goodness. But it's scary to go into that unknown because it's unknown, right? Yeah. So I'd love to hear from you guys, like any it's really all about mindset. Chaya, it's like it really is. It's that really is what it is. It's what is how is dream interpretation is taken. Yeah, the good is always what we want. And that's why, have you ever seen, people try to be happy, or they're in an event, it's sometimes harder for people to be happy, more uncomfortable than it is to be sad. So it's like, you almost like, like it's weird, it's strange, because we all really want to be happy, but like our default is like, no, I'm not actually going to, how am I going to look like? And so Avigal, I'm not sure what you mean. What is it on the change in how his dream interpretation is taken by the brothers, you're saying? That's what you mean? Okay. 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 Do you guys hear me well? Okay, sorry. Because for some reason I missed your question. I apologize. Like, I think like it's how, like, I just plugged in here. But let me, Avigal, let me try to, we kind of work with these two parts of ourselves, and the tribes really disdained Yosef, which is like the parts of ourselves that kind of disdain this part of us that's like, oh, it could be good. No, you're just like an idealist. You're just a dreamer. You're out there. And that's a part of ourselves that's very much self-critical. And yeah, and he's the youngest of 12, like second to youngest of 12. Yeah, the Joseph is very small in compared to the bigger part of ourselves, because actually in our own mind, 80% of our thoughts are just negative, incessant thoughts that go on and on in our brain. But that
if we grow him well, he becomes the king.
Right. But if we, exactly, well, despite, I think the most incredible part of Joseph's story really is that, and a very powerful one, is that Joseph did not have a functional upbringing. His mother died when he was a child. His brothers hated him. He was sent away. And so often we think, why was I raised this way? Why did I have this kind of life, these type of parents, siblings, whatever? And we're like, you know,
Why am I different?
and how could I fix it, right? So I remember having a conversation with a young woman that was asked me, what do I do if, you know, how do I have a relationship with God? God is called a father. If I had the opposite of a positive relationship with my own father, abusive one, how do I do that? And in a sense, we have to, right? And all of us, even if we had great parents, nevertheless, there's still so much more.
You are currently unmuted. I'll plus the button.
Oh, hello? Do you guys hear me? Yeah? Oh, okay. All right. You know, we are forgot what I just lost my train of thought there on that.
You were
Abusive father.
Oh,
with
yeah. So that notion of Joseph, if he could do it by having that kind of an upbringing, why? Because he trained himself to even surpass and go beyond the abusive childhood. It's just the abusive childhood that he had. He was able to go to surpass them. That and that's an amazing concept, and very empowering concept, that, you know, a person could look in their life and say, like, I have gripes about this and about that. Well, and many of them are very valid, right? But at the same time, we could stay stuck in that gripe type of adult, and many people live that way, you know, for their whole lives. And Joseph chose, actively, consciously chose. He said, I'm not going to live that you know, I'm a victim life. I'm not going to live that kind of a life, a victim kind of a life. I'm choosing to make that switch of looking at the positive. So the other parts will be like, what, how could you, you know, you're this and that, who do you think you are, and why, you know, what do you think you are, and all those thoughts that go on in our mind all the time. And Joseph is like, well, you know, there's that struggle. They're taking Joseph, they're putting him in a pit, right? And then that voice is like, no, let me out. I want to be positive. I want goodness. And so he gets out, and he's like, well, I'm going to persist. I'm going to see that even the opposition itself dissipates, goes away, right? Pada b'shalom nafshi mikravli, that the opposite, that what seems like there's opposition, even that's transformed.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
In the beginning, it says that Joseph was the child of his old age, and then it says that Israel loved him the best. So is Jacob at this final stage, at this maturity stage, when he has him, that he wasn't at when he had the other sons, and he looks at him and loves him because he realizes that it didn't have to be so hard. It didn't have to be the way it was. And so maybe Jacob was at that mature stage, and we misunderstand why he loved him so much. But maybe he saw something because he was at the more mature stage that he didn't see in the other sons because he wasn't. He was struggling then.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing that. That's a really beautiful point, and that's why it says at the beginning of the parsha, it says Ele toldot Yaakov Yosef. Yaakov really innately loved Joseph very much, because he was his self, like his true inner self, like his, his best self, we could say, Joseph. And it's just that, Jacob had to go through this very intense struggles in his life. And that's what he bequeathed, right, to his children, to the 12 tribes. They were all doing this work. But one of them, and that's Joseph, is like, Dad, we can now have abundance. We can now, like, life could be good. It could be good like right now. And, there's no reason that we can have this abundance. The universe, right? God is great, is vast. It's not like this lack mentality where everything is, oh, I don't have, and I can't, and I could. And we could have, incredible, just goodness. And again, it's not necessarily about money, and it's not about, but goodness is a state of mind, and it's a happiness, and it's like, and where you are, bringing that positive state of mind too. But Joseph had both. He had it all. Like, he manifested it all, from the highest level to the most material level. He had all abundance there. And those are the stages, of Yaakov, the struggles, and the tribes that kind of took after, we could say, and then Yosef is the optimal, optimized version, that's doing this work of, of channeling really down, into this world, in a state of ease, of goodness, of grace, of happiness, of love, and abundance, positivity. So all that is what, all of us need, and we already have. It's just really working on reminding ourselves that I'm a work in progress. We all are, and yet I know that God loves me all the time, and he wants to give me all the time, and I deserve all the time. There is that deep deservance and enoughness, really, that we all are, and we all have inside. So, like, maybe to finish off, if we may, everyone, if we could put our hands on our hearts, and feel into that part within us, which is the enoughness, and the Joseph, and that beautiful child that we are, and envision that child and see that radiating, happy, joyous, abundant, free child. And feel into the other part of yourself, which may be below your heart. And that may be the tribes. That may be the endurance that you need to have, the perseverance, the work, right? To have guts. And that part of yourself, of ourselves, is so valuable, because it has done, and it is doing so much, so we could thank it. and be kind to that part too. And together, Yosef and the tribes come together, holding hand by hand. And channeling down goodness for the entire world. So any parts of our lives and where we needed to allow that opening for abundance to come in. Simply allow it. Don't worry what people think about you, how you may look. You could put on a smile and be sure that everything will be all right. All right, my friends, my blessings to you for a beautiful Shabbat. And may we take this in into the rest of our week. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Happy Chanukah.
Thank you, Rabbi. We wish you the same. And
Thank
Shabbat
you.
Shalom.
Thank you. Thank you. Blessings. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Abigail.
Great class, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. God bless. Blessings. Shabbat
It
Shalom.
really answered a lot of questions. Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm so happy. Many blessings for you and the entire family and for everyone, right? For the whole world. It's great being on with you guys and looking forward to next week, Chanukah.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Blessings.
Blessings.
To be